Porsche Macan has proved so popular with its intended audience that it is now sold out for over a year, and as we discovered earlier in the year at its launch, it is a phenomenally good car. And then there is the BMW X4. Ignore the looks for a moment if you can, and instead consider that beneath its shrunken X6 bodywork, the X4 is actually an X3, and you might take a bit more kindly to BMW's latest supersport SUV. But is it in any way a match for the mighty new Macan? And on the road, if not the eye, can it compete with Porsche's new superstar? The Porsche is fractionally cheaper than the BMW, which is a surprise, especially as it has an identical amount of power at 255 bhp, a touch more torque at 427 pounds-feet versus 413, and weighs a couple of kilograms less. Even so, BMW's claimed 0 to 60 time is half a second better than the Macan's. So let's see who's telling the truth.
Okay, the inevitable drag race against the Porsche. I've got it in Sport Plus. I'm going to put it in manual. I'm just going to hold it against the brakes slightly before we go. It really feels like it wants to go. Wow, that's pretty impressive. That is pretty impressive. And it is just a tiny bit quicker than the Porsche. I wasn't expecting that at all. I mean, it's fag paper close, but I think the BMW is just quicker than the Porsche.
Despite its launch control system, the Porsche can't quite level with the BMW, as you can see. But the difference is so small, it may as well not exist. And anyway, is the 0 to 60 time really what matters in vehicles such as these? Not really, no.
I mean, I know this thing is based fundamentally on the X3, but as soon as you climb inside, you can tell it's different. Purely because you sit that much lower to the road, and the centre of gravity is that much lower. And it does feel quantifiably more sporting inside than an X3. But having said that, just rumbling along in, I'm in drive basically in 5th or 6th gear or something like that, and it's very refined, it's very quiet. It does drive really well, I think, the X4. Go for a drive in it, and it might be a big old wagon, but it's really impressive in what it does. The handling along this little tight and twisty and nudgy snake handling course is just, I mean, it's really, really good. You can throw it around and it just does exactly what you want it to do. It doesn't actually feel like it weighs anything like what it actually does. You'd have a job to stay with this X4 through this handling circuit, even in a fairly decent hot hatch, and I'm really not exaggerating. That is how composed and how sorted it is. I mean, okay, it understeers, and the traction control is doing its absolute utmost to stop it from running wide, just taking the power away a bit, but I mean, that's quick. That's really quick round there. It's also fast in a straight line. Okay, the engine noise ain't up to much, but the actual thrust it produces is pretty bonkers. I mean, that's 100 and 110 miles an hour we're doing now. And it's not about the power. Okay, it's got 255 horsepower. It's all about the torque and what happens between kind of 1500 revs and 3000 revs, and allied to a gearbox that just picks ratios off, you know, super smoothly and super quickly. It's impressive. I cannot sit here and say to you that the X4D isn't impressive to drive, because it is. It's very good. It steers well, it stops well, it goes well too. I don't actually believe that anyone would take their X4D M Sport anywhere near off-road. But the fact is, if you want to go off-road in it, you press your off-road button, you go off-road, and it just does what it does. Again, it's impressive. I think they've I suspect they've engineered it to do something that no one's ever really going to ever bother doing in it, but the fact that it can is still pretty useful. I mean, you'd never drive your 3 Series through there, would you? That's quite a lot of flexibility in one car. I know what you're thinking, why does it look the way it does? Well, you know what, some people actually, I know you may find this hard to believe, I find it hard to believe, but some people actually like the way the X6 looked. Which is why the X4 has been created, you know. But actually the X4 gets away with it a little bit better than the X6. A, because the X6 laid the way, and B, because it's a little bit smaller physically than the X6. And somehow that makes it just that little bit less offensive. But only a little bit. Bottom line though, ignore the looks, the X4D is a pretty good car underneath. So the first thing you notice when you get into the Macan after the X4 is how much lower again you sit even than in the BMW. It very nearly feels like you're sitting in a normal car in the Macan. And I really like that because it just makes the whole thing feel that much more sporting, and you just feel integrated into the car that much more. Great driving position in the Macan, great cabin as well. I love this centre console with the gear lever in the middle and all these buttons either side. It's just neat, and but it's kind of intuitive as well, even though there are loads of different buttons. But the thing about the Macan, it's just amazing actually. The chassis that this thing's got, the way it handles, the way it rides, the way it steers, it's just absolutely bonkers how good it is, considering it's an SUV. This thing will go around, will run rings around most normal road cars in terms of handling. In fact, it will run rings around most sports cars in terms of handling. That's how sharp it is. But here, as with the X4, we're going to see how good it is off-road, and just, I mean, like the BMW, but even more so. You just think that there's no one's ever going to do this in a Macan, but they should do if they buy one, because it's really, really good off-road. You've got this off-road button which just softens everything up, and I think it increases the ride height a bit as well. And you just feel like you could go across the Sahara Desert in this thing like this. The ride beneath your backside on this really kind of horrible, rough, muddy road is definitely a bit smoother, a bit more composed than it is in the BMW. You don't feel like you're kind of being bounced around all over the place. As a result, I would bet my last pound, dollar, whatever, on this being able to get up hills that the X4 couldn't off-road. It just feels more go anywhere, it really does. Okay, we come off the off-road course. I unpress the off-road button, I press the Sport Plus button, I turn the traction control off and the PSM, and all of a sudden you've jumped into a sports car again that just has this fabulous turn-in, mega composure in the middle of a corner, top brakes. It's a Porsche, it's gonna have top brakes, and it blows my mind how good this car is in terms of its ride and handling and steering, in terms of the way it drives. There's almost no compromise in it being an SUV, and yet you've got a load of room there in the back seats, you've got a massive great big boot, you have got the slightly commanding driving position that your SUV owner wants, and yet at the same time it's nice and It's nice and low. They've just completely hit the bullseye with this car, Porsche. And I'm not surprised that they are all sold out for the next year and a bit.
So which wins? The X4 is fractionally quicker and has the better appointed cabin, but the Porsche is cheaper, has a touch more room in its rear seats, proved to be marginally more economical on test, and definitely has the sweeter driving position. More than any of that though, is the way the Porsche drives, which is exceptional for such a big machine. In most eyes, it also looks better than the BMW. Result, the Macan wins, not by a mile, but by enough. The end.